I am so ready. Countdown, 3.
I don't know how those companies effectively stay in business in the future.
What you two are doing is a boundless mindset.
Thinking that you weren't going to have to learn a lot. Well, you made a huge mistake.
There's one place I feel safe geeking out is
It's
here.
here.
There's a reason why we chose technology, not marketing.
One of these days, we're going to get help in here. Like, get real AV people.
We're so close to making this almost perfect.
We're almost perfect. We have our guest we're going to introduce you guys to here in just a minute, Keith. And he asked me, "Hey, Howie, what's your role in this? Are you a professional podcaster?" I'm like, anything but, as poor Keith is finding out here. So as we continue with our trial and error, we welcome everybody back. Brian, thanks for being here today.
Always fun to be here.
Right.
It's always fun to have such a great guest like Keith. You'll hear so much more about him, but having a practitioner, CIO, CTO, technology exec person is what we like to do best.
Right
and
on,
I think that's how we learn the most. So.
Right on. But before we get started, listen, everybody, our research shows that only 40% of our avid listeners, so that's 60% of the people, do not subscribe to our podcast that listen to us regularly, right? So do us a favor. If you're getting value from this show and you like listening to us and you're listening to us all the time, or if you're just listening to us a little bit of the time, do us a favor, and whatever platform you're on, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, because we broadcast across the 3, just hit that subscribe button for us. And if you're really enjoying the show, if you could share it with just 2 colleagues, that's our only ask. That's our only price for watching the show, listening to the show, and going forward. So we really would appreciate that. And also, don't forget, everyone, you can find us at thecioproject.com. Watch our released episodes there, learn more about our hosts and our guests, and drop us a line with any questions or topics you would like us to tackle in our upcoming episodes, as well as ideas and suggestions you have for the show. So again, that is thecioproject.com. And with that out of the way, let's get right into it. Really excited to introduce you guys to our guest. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Keith Fulton, former CIO and CTO. Keith is currently the Chief Data Officer at Jack Henry. He is responsible for developing and implementing a comprehensive data strategy program to enhance our products and business processes, as well as leading the AI transformation efforts across the enterprise. AI?
Yeah, how hard can that be?
Yeah. AI? What is that? What is AI? I don't think I've heard much about AI. Is that a thing?
My goodness.
A seasoned technology executive, Keith joined Jack Henry in December 2024, bringing more than 25 years experience to the table. And last but not least, Keith is the author of, drum roll please,
Drum roll,
Maxing Out, How to Get the Most Out of Yourself and Your Team.
Awesome. Keith, welcome. We're so excited to have you here with us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
Oh, yeah. And what folks may not know here is that Keith and I met last year through a common friend, Dan Roberts, who is, very well-traveled CIO. What does he call himself? CIO Whisperer, I think he calls it, if I remember correctly.
CIO Whisperer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Dan's wonderful. And he introduced us, and I heard about Keith had written this book. And I was saying before, when I read these books, and I read a lot of books, it's so hard when you read like a 300 or 400 page book and you're just you like to think you come out of there with a nugget or two. This is a book that in many ways I told Keith when we met that it's a book more in my mind as sort of just like years of wisdom and best practices kind of all rolled into one. It talks about what it's like to be an employee, what it's like to be a manager, what are some of the challenges as you go through your career. And, and I've got a very marked up version. I had to clean it up just for this thing. And he goes, no, show them all your coffee stains and everything.
That's the best endorsement you can have, right? When you see the coffee stains and you have food on it. But didn't you say you've given away 5 of your own copies?
I have. I don't even know my original. I looked through these copies and I'm like, this isn't the one I took notes in. And it's just I keep getting more copies and, giving away the ones I had.
Right. And this is not just hyperbole because Keith is a guest. You've gone so far as to actually have Keith come in.
We have. Keith has now presented, I believe, 3 sessions, if I remember correctly. And it's been incredibly well received. We, in our organization, have about 25-ish people in our IT leadership team. And Keith has generally, joined us and, shared some of the elements of his book and best practices and taking questions. And I'll tell you one of the best aspects, I think, of the work that Keith has done with us is, we do breakout sessions and things. With breakout sessions, and we have, discussions of real issues that, that touch all of us. And it's been great. It's been an unbelievable experience, both the book itself, which I know I see it on desktops all across our organization, which makes me feel good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It makes Keith feel good. And it and we get the wisdom of someone like Keith. So
and we won't talk about how I keep getting left off the follow-up.
Yeah. You made one. Did you make one of the three?
Yeah, I made the first one. It was cool.
That's not
No,
bad.
it's awesome. Yeah.
That's
which is why I've been pouting, because I keep getting left off.
You'd make the All-Star game if you're in baseball.
So Keith, welcome. We're really happy to have you. Before we get into the book, I'd love to hear kind of the Reader's Digest version of your superhuman origin story, right? Like, how did you get here? Like, where did it start? And, draw us the line from there to here.
Well, I started out very technical, and I was a computer nerd in school. I taught myself to code when I was 11. I learned assembly language when I was 13, and I coded all the time. I never had a teenager job like working at a McDonald's or something. My first paying programming job was when I was 14. I worked my way through college coding, and I did that. And I became a consultant after that, and I was with Anderson Consulting back before it was Accenture through most of the 90s. I worked all over the world because I was in oil and gas, which is a very global field. So I was very lucky in that regard. And then I got into financial services. And so then I ended up coming to industry instead of, consulting. And so ever since then, probably since about 2004, I've been on the buying side of this service and working in the industry and financial services. Most recently now I work at Jack Henry, which is a software company that sells software that runs community banks and credit unions all across the country. We have about 20% of the banking system of America running through our software. And it's a great industry to be in because it's complicated. It's heavily regulated. It's got a lot of legacy mainframe stuff in it. It's got mobile apps. It's got everything. The data and analytics and data science stuff that I'm doing now at Jack Henry is super advanced. It would knock your socks off. And so there's a spectrum from, PL1 code on a mainframe you never heard of, all the way to data science running in the cloud. And so it's been really, it's a great place to be and get a lot of variety in what I do.
That's awesome. What's great about just listening to your story too. And I got a question for you because I'm always curious. Sometimes we talk to, get questions even from the audience and things like that in the past. It's like people ask questions about like, hey, so becoming a CIO these days, and as you know, you've been doing this for a long time, like myself, the journey has changed over the years, right? But when, it's been well said that like there is no playbook for anyone just wanting to become a CIO. Like, where do you think, when you think about your career, you just kind of shared some of it with us, and you think about where it's going and the role of AI and things like that, like, and when you think about that, like what career path do you think, is it going to be like at different times, like if someone comes from an operational background, do you think that's going to be harder now to be successful in the future in an AI capacity type of thing? Or do you think like people come from more of a development thing or come from the business maybe because AI is now, kind of, I think is at the intersection between business and technology a lot more so than maybe what you and I grew up with?
Yeah. I think that, I told that story about myself as a teenager to say that I grew up on the tech side of things. And since, in the last 10 years, I've become an executive, I've learned to pretend to be an executive, but on the inside, I'm an enterprise architect at heart. And so, I learned to act like a business person, but in reality, that's not my thing. So I went through that journey of how to learn that. And I think that was one of the keys to making the book of like figuring out the trick to act like an executive,
Yeah.
I think with regard to AI, I think that technical people and technologists have a big advantage over the business people in the coming year. They have for the last couple of years with AI, and it will only accelerate because the rate of change in AI is so fast that only technologists can really keep up with it or understand why the next breakthrough matters. And so, the process of selling, if you're a salesperson, or the process of being in marketing, we have a little bit better tooling now in those areas, but the underlying sales process of how you get somebody closed and sign a contract is not innovated in the last 2 years the way AI has. And so technologists are the people who can keep up the best. And even it's a challenge for us. I'm sure, Brian, you have the same thing. I study it all the time and I feel like I'm falling behind, but I know way more than the average, business person does. And they don't understand these articles. They don't understand the breakthroughs. So we have to lead the organization. And I think we have become even more critical to the business than we were 5 years ago because we are the only hope of a business to keep up with that rate of change.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from too. I think the only thing I would add is that, which is a bit of a different twist, is that, you mentioned your assembler background. Like, my jobs, starting off were a lot like much like yours. It wasn't assembler, but I was working on Apple IIe writing like Pascal or something
Yep,
crazy,
I did that too. Yep.
and but nowadays with AI, you don't have to be that person, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like in some
Yeah.
respects, I mean, having that background, I think is an accelerant in many respects, but it's not as much of a, in my mind, a little bit, it's not as much of a prerequisite in some respects, as long as if people can sort of think creatively. I mean, the problem with that is you can only take it so far, I think a little bit, right? You kind of
That's
run
right.
into a little bit of like, you can almost sometimes take initiatives to the first, like, absolutely, you can accelerate POCs, you can accelerate a lot of creativity things, you can dramatically accelerate like wireframes and things like that where I think people didn't play as much of an active role in the
Right.
past. The problem is it almost comes to a wall though at some point when you want to, oh, we're going to support it. Oh, we have to do, support
Yeah.
cyber concerns. Oh, we
Mhm.
have operational considerations, SLAs,
UAT,
UAT,
Yeah, we
or even before all that.
automated
Yeah.
testing.
Even before all
at
that,
Jack Henry, I
what's the
built
tech
it.
stack going to be? Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Sorry.
I
Keith.
was going to say at Jack Henry, we addressed that problem 8 months ago, and we've innovated on that. We can come back to that, but we built a vibe coding support team to help the people out there that are the amateurs to get their code into an operational state that Jack Henry can live with for the next 10 years.
Mhm.
You remember what it was like in the 90s with MS Access and how any accountant could make an Access database, and then that would become an integral part of some business process, and then that person would quit, and no one would know how to maintain it, let alone like where the code was for it
Yeah,
or
yeah,
anything.
yeah. Access and code repositories didn't go
Yeah,
together too well.
so we have, people all over the business vibe coding useful things, small little micro apps for one special purpose niche. But we need that code in GitHub, and we need it scanned by, vulnerability scanning, and we need it hooked into our Okta single sign-on, and
Yep.
we need it
Yep.
hooked into a real database and not a Java, text file, JSON text file or something. And so they don't, the lady in procurement doesn't know how to do that, and she doesn't care. She doesn't give a flip about that. We need to take it from her and make it useful and give her a way that she can keep evolving it in a vibe way, but in a way that also is operationalizable for the company. I think back
I
on
had
your original question though,
I'm sorry, go
huh?
ahead. I'm sorry to
But
interrupt you. Go ahead, Keith.
I was going to say that on the original question though, I do think that amateurs now it's easier forever than non-programmers to write programs. And the vibe coding and kind of front ends and prototypes is the easy part. And it's kind of like, there's a difference between making a paper airplane and an actual airplane. Okay. And actual airplanes are really hard. Now, I think AI tools, there's kind of like vibe coding and front ends, and then there's like AI engineering, which is using AI to assist the back end developer team with
Sure.
architecture and heavy things. And I think the AIs are either doing that or they're close to doing it. They will be able to do it. But the lady in procurement is never going to know how to do that. And they're
Right.
not used to thinking at that level of rigor and that level of detail about the requirements. So there's always going to be an engineering sort of requirement for engineering think at some level when you get much beyond the paper airplane.
Yeah, it's funny. You and I were listening to a podcast yesterday with the CEO of NVIDIA.
Oh, Jensen Huang. Yeah.
Yeah, and we
Yeah.
were having
It's
this.
Lex Friedman.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a Lex
Yeah.
Friedman podcast. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and he was saying like, someone that he had asked him, Lex had asked him, he's like, "Oh, do you see yourselves having like fewer engineers?" And he's like, "No, more."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Oh, like, I mean, because they're going to be even more productive, and we're going to get even more done. And we're going to do more things." And I think, obviously that depends greatly on your company and things like that. But I do agree with you. I think the software development life cycle, if you will, has really changed, in terms of
Very
when
much.
you think of like the engagement of like a citizen developer and things like that. And it'll continue to kind of move down the stack. Like I agree with you, but you do kind of reach a certain point when you start getting into like complex APIs or especially external applications versus internal applications and other things where, you want to make sure you've got sort of your rock stars vetting these things at some level. But the good news is that like, you're like, I was chuckling when you were talking about Access because I mean, I had so many memories when I was in the investment
that was
industry
a
where
blast from the
Access
past.
came
Yeah.
out and oh my
Yeah.
goodness, like it's funny because people are like, oh my God, isn't this amazing? And I remember having this like love-hate relationship with this thing because somebody just like nowadays would knock off some, thoughtful, slick little mini applet, like, and next thing you know, they want to make it available to like 37 people and they can't understand why it can't scale. Right. Or I know
Yep.
when I came to the Weather Channel where Howie and I met, there were Lotus Notes
Oh my
customers.
God, the Lotus
And
Notes.
Lotus
Yeah.
Notes was a lot like that too. Like anybody could knock one of those things out, but oh my God, Lotus Notes had so many flaws. I remember forbidding people from adding any more Lotus Notes applications, and people thought it was sort of like the Antichrist. And I just remember being like, it was like a legalized virus as far as I
Brian
was
and I
concerned.
actually, when we first met, bonded on our hatred of Lotus Notes.
Yeah, that was an easy
But I
one to
love the
hate
access.
for a
I
while.
love the access database analogy. That's a new one for me, but that is such
Okay.
a great analogy for this citizen development phenomenon thing that we have going on right now.
So I think
Only
way,
this one's got legs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
exactly. The way I look at it is, if we ban it, then we're just going to have shadow vibe coding, like shadow
Yep.
IT.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
of
so we
course.
need to find a way to embrace it and support it so people do it our way. And then we don't have shadow and we have things that we can support. And so by making a way for them to go with the flow, we can channel their creativity, maximize their benefit to the company, and still end up with something we don't, regret the morning after.
Yeah, I am like, I think it's a win-win completely
Yeah.
because the other thing that underlies all of this is a sense of ownership. Because if you think about it, one of the challenges that people like Keith and I and yourself, Howie, had historically is it's like, like I want to do a project. You sit down with somebody, you understand all their business requirements, and then you calculate an ROI, God willing, and it looks like it's going to be positive. And then you dig in with all these requirements and you convert the requirements to specs and then you write the code and you do piloting and prototyping and you develop something. It's different when the person is just regurgitating need and you're like an enablement, but they have literally your hands off, compared to, I think what's great about it is it creates stickiness and ownership. And to me, they become like us, right? Like we take ownership, as developers, you take ownership very, very seriously because it's like, you're many of us, I think in our careers, think of ourselves much more like artists than engineers. And, like that's your piece of art and, you want people to think favorably of it. And I think it's terrific that that's now getting more extended into the business community.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
Right.
when I first pitched the idea of building a vibe coding support team, I said, look, Jack Henry has 7,200 associates in it. And I said, not all 7,200 of those are going to vibe code something. But what if 100 did? What if we scratched 100 needs, made 100 processes better? Wouldn't that be worth something to the company? And I
Yeah.
was thinking when I said that, I didn't put a time frame on it, but I was thinking, 3 years, something like that. 4 months later in March, we realized that we already had 100 vibe coded apps in the company already. It's gone viral and people want to create. They're used to thinking of the products they use. They kind of get imposed on them by IT.
Yeah.
And they're the immovable objects that they can't do anything about. But now they can start to create little glue things and little utilities
Yeah.
that help them. And that is sweeping our company like wildfire, and it's making our company a better place. It's worth that investment of our, couple people doing support for them. It's going to be an amazing future for that.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it too. I mean, it creates it's your org model changes. When you think about it, like, it sounds like you kind of have, created something that didn't exist before, kind of like a vibe coding support or component of your organization.
Cool.
Like, I'm curious, it's like when you think about the future of your IT team, type of thing, I mean, with AI, I mean, how do you see that kind of evolving? Like, and I mean, I know that's a big ask, but I mean, just maybe in the
I think it's
near term.
evolving. It's something I think about a lot right now because I think we need to evolve and we have not yet evolved.
Mhm.
I think the main thing I see with AI assisted engineering, not just the vibe coding part, but the back end, just
Mhm.
engineering in general now with AI, Cursor and Claude Code and so forth. I think that the productivity of the developers is getting so high that I think the whole definition of what a scrum team is or a squad needs to change. And typically, I've spent 20 years building scrum teams over, 8 to 12 people. and there's always like a scrum master and 3 or 4 coders and 3 or 4 testers and a BA. Okay. And that's 10 people. Okay. And I think in the new world order that we're headed rapidly towards, in the sense of about to go over Niagara Falls, we need 3 people on a team. Maybe you need a tester and a BA and a
Mhm.
coder, or maybe some of those are merged. I think the whole notion of you have a BA and a front end designer, like UX designer, and let's say a front end coder that's a React specialist.
Yep.
I think those are going to become an anachronism, and those are all going to become one job.
Yep.
And as those start to collapse into single jobs, then all of a sudden my Scrum team, to be a full stack team, can be 2 or 3 people. And so I've heard other people refer to those as a pod rather than a Scrum team or a squad. And so I'm starting to use that term as well. And I want to restructure my entire development team. I got a few hundred people under me. Okay. They don't know this yet. They can listen to your podcast. But we're gonna turn them into pods of probably 3 or 4, depending on the team, in
Yep.
the coming months.
Yeah, we're very much moving the exact same direction, by the way, a pod model. And, and I think the composition of those pods changes based upon the life cycle or like where you are in the SDLC kind of thing. You know what I mean? In other
Mhm.
words, as you kind of evolve it from, I'll call it like early stage prototype to, a more functional design type of thing. And now you need to get into initial UAT or automated testing and things. Different. I mean, people can kind of, I look at like bolt in and other people kind of step back. Like, if somebody was involved heavily in sort of the GUI or other things, well, like their job's done. You can move on to the next project. So I'm really excited about it because I feel like it's going to be a much more active role for the business. Historically, like, there's so, you took results back and if someone didn't do a good job, it's like that metaphor of that, they were looking for a horse and they got like a camel,
Mhm.
kind of thing. And that wasn't, and the fact that they were both mammals sometimes was a success.
I think the thing I'm excited about with this is that in addition to accelerating the work of a BA writing requirements and turning them into Jira stories, in addition to the coders coding faster, in addition to the testers writing automated tests with AI, everybody's faster individually. But when we go to a smaller team structure, we go from a 10-person Scrum team to a
Mhm.
3-person pod, the stand-ups get shorter. The amount of synchronization of just misunderstandings gets easier. The amount of overhead and communicating and planning gets easier. Everybody has a shared understanding of what they're doing in a much easier way. So I think what we're going to see is that as the teams continue to shrink, the pace of coordination is going to also get exponentially faster. And that's
Yeah.
going to have another flywheel effect on all this. And I think we're going to laugh 2 years from now, and I would normally say 5, but let's say 1 year, the way AI is going. But it used to be that Amazon had the 2 pizza team structure, and that was a big deal to have a team that was small enough that they could eat 2
Right.
pizzas at lunch. And I think we're going to laugh at how big that is soon. And it's going to
I
be the
think there are,
1 pizza team.
yeah, Keith and I, by the way, have never had these conversations before. And it's,
Yeah.
even in some of our breakouts and
Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. And it's amazing as you talk about these things with other people, you realize like, once you've gone through it and you've built a few applications, you kind of start to go like, oh, like, the old way of doing this, it doesn't make as much sense as it used to. I mean, I think the tricky part is, in many respects, is that we all have, and I don't want to call it legacy because 3 months ago wasn't legacy, but we
Right.
all have like a lot of like we have tradition. It's almost like you have to go back and look at your organization with. You may have traditional legacy. You've got some things you want to retire or deprecate in the near term, but then you've got sort of a whole new block of technology that is not an AI first design architecture and things like that, which is completely fine. But now as you look at making enhancements to it, now you're kind of in the same conundrum, right? You're like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, do I go back to React and Angular type of thing and have to write my Python? And do I do, or do I use it as an opportunity to kind of do a rewrite of these things? And I think it gets complicated really quick, I think, in some respects, in terms of, it's easy to look at the greenfield things and go, oh, well, let's just start something new and let's use agentic AI and let's do it right.
Right.
It's
It's
harder
it's
when you
tempting.
start to look at those things that are in the mid-range, if you will, that were purely fully functional systems in our eyes like a year ago, and now you're looking at them like a little sideways, trying to figure out like, what the right toolkit is or what's the appropriate, do we do a rewrite? Can we do a hybrid?
Yeah.
It's interesting, don't you think, Keith? I mean, a little bit like it
Yeah, I
gets
do. I think in the Jack Henry case, most of our we do build new products every year, but most of our products are well established and have been around for a long time. And so they're very large as a result. So one of our core banking apps might be 20 million lines of code. And, a million token window, context window sounds like a lot until your code is 100 million tokens. Okay. Then the 1% that you can fit in your content, all of a sudden maintaining that code is not
Yeah.
automatic with AI. So we are dealing with challenges like that in addition, because our stuff tends to be pretty mature. Now the new stuff takes easy to it. And you're right. I think the greenfield area is much easier, but the fun part is figuring out the hard part. So that's what we're
Yeah,
doing.
totally. And also just as you mentioned, like really understanding your application portfolio. So you're like, okay, do I need something that's highly deterministic, in terms of what I'm doing, or where do I have latitude, and where don't I, and things like that. I think is going to continue to be kind of all these new things that we're learning, and we like to say sometimes we're kind of talk with some of our guests, just that like, what's awesome about what we do is thanks, Mom.
I have to get him to eat the mic, otherwise he gets away from it. He sort
The
of runs away from it.
so he chases me, but I lost my train of thought. Shoot,
I'm sorry.
where's it going? It's quite all right. It's the rate of change you were saying. I remember saying one of our podcasts, like, if you didn't think your job was going to change, like you totally took the wrong job, like, and never more than before. And like, to me, it's the most exciting time in my career, you know,
Totally.
but I know there's lots of people who are like really, really worried and very concerned. And I don't mean they shouldn't. I mean, your average, I don't mean just everybody, like, I mean, when you cast a broad net, we lived through a period of, mobility, or introducing the internet and even computing in some respects, and then mobility, and then data, then cloud, and, all these things. I mean, AI is different because, once you can get to the generative stage, it does change things. It does, we all know this, any of us. And so, I mean, it's exciting time, but as I tell my own kids who are in their 20s, I'm like, now's the time. Like, do not put your head in the sand. Like, you need to kind of be very bullish and embrace, it's in some respects, I'm sure if you went back in your career and you go look at migrating somebody from mainframe to client server, or from client server to web or mobile or other things, like in my career, I found that I was successful probably 80% of the time.
It's the 80-20 rule.
I mean, it just keeps coming back to 80-20 in my world. But like, it's just like there were 20% that were like, ooh, I just learned Spanish and I'm not sure I want to learn French. And you're kind of like, well, no, you need to learn French.
I mean, the reality is, like, fighting these trends is not a way to win. Like, you got to learn to surf the trend, because the trend is inevitable. And I think that's true of this too. I would say younger people have an advantage here though, because, in IT, depending on how well established in your career you are, you should have learned multiple technologies. You've seen these ways before. Young people haven't seen that. So maybe they're intimidated by it. But like I would tell you, it's exam week right now for my son. He's finishing ninth grade tomorrow.
Mhm.
Okay. And he is using AI. He has invented a way of studying using AI. And he got a list of questions, like topics to drill on. He put them into AI to make a study guide for it. Then he took the study guide and he put it in AI to make an auditory oral exam where the AI tests him on the questions from the study guide that he made from the points that the teacher gave him the other day.
Yeah.
And he just made all that up himself, and he's 15. So he is, I mean, you hear a lot about students using AI to cheat, but
Mhm.
students can use this to help themselves too, and to get stronger and to be better. And I think we have way too much negativity in the media and in the news about
I
how
think
AI
that's
is
on
going to
his side.
destroy
I think that's
jobs,
on his side too.
all this kind of stuff. And we don't talk enough about using AI, not for brain rot, but for brain growth and for augmentation.
Have you
Steve
guys
Jobs.
heard? Oh, sorry,
What?
Keith. Have you guys heard about the commencement speeches this last week that have
Yes.
gone kind of upside down? Gloria Caulfield over at UCF started to talk about AI, kind of in the same vein that we're talking about it right now, and she got booed really badly. And then Eric Schmidt, the old Google CEO, had the same thing happen. There's actually 3 or 4 that went down like that, but those are the biggest high-profile ones.
Yeah.
It's really
I think that
interesting to
what's happened
see.
is that the college kids have heard so much negativity about how it's taking away their jobs. Entry-level jobs are being destroyed. 300 million jobs are going to get eliminated. Dario Amodi's on CNBC every single day saying in 18 months, what was the Microsoft CTO or CAIO yesterday, I think, or the day before, said every white collar job will be everyone, not a part of them, all of them will be wiped out in the next 18 months. And I'm not sure if he's ever tried Copilot or not, but he should try it. He'll stop saying that. Okay, he will stop saying it. So I think what's happening is, I heard someone say that these leaders like Dario, they're speaking out there to make a big impact and to kind of maximize their valuation rather than really trying to be accurate about and balanced about the positives that are going to
Right.
happen in society too. And we need to really have a much more balanced view of this, or else we're going to
100%.
get a lot more booing and a lot more resistance. And it's actually, in the long run, Dario's attempt to improve his valuation is actually hurting his valuation because it's
I
going to
think
hurt
so.
adoption
Me too.
of the
I
technology.
That's why I liked Jensen Huang's.
Jensen was
Yeah.
terrific,
Yeah.
by the way, because he's a super calm, balanced, logically thinking kind of
Grounded,
person.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's, I read some article too the other day where I think there was a survey, and they had, asked people about sort of like how they think of AI. And I was shocked. I want to say the number was 71%. 71% had either a kind of negative or a doubtful,
Or fearful.
like fearful,
Based
maybe
in
a better
fear.
word, of the future with AI. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like that is, but you know what, the thing that plays into that so much, Keith, too, is you look at these companies, whether it's like Meta or Google or, Salesforce or Oracle or any of these companies that are announcing these big layoffs and things. And, and every single one of them says like, oh, why'd you do that? Oh, because of AI. Because, we have to build data centers, and data centers are really expensive, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, like, I think at least when I look at the larger ones, when I talk to people I know, friends and other ones that are in those companies, a lot of them, they're using it as a reorganization
That's right.
opportunity, right? They're
Totally.
like, we're going to move away from this side. We're going to move more toward whatever different characteristics of, employees that we think will be more successful in the future. We'll have early retirement for others. But they blanket it under this AI thing, and the media just eats it up and just kind of is like, oh yeah, that plays into our narrative. So, oh yeah,
they
it must be
swallow
AI
whatever
doing
they're
it.
told. Yeah. I think I posted about this on LinkedIn because I got angry one night about it, because I think it was after Block, so they were laying off 40% of their people.
Yes.
And I called it AI washing, where they're laying people off because they have a bloated organization, and they realize that if they just blame AI for it instead of blaming their own bad management, they
Yep.
actually make themselves look better, and they make themselves look advanced on AI, when really it's just a plain old fashioned layoff from bad management.
It's a great
It's-
spin. It's a great spin, isn't it?
It's a get out of jail free card,
It is.
and they all are drinking the same Kool-Aid. And so it worked for one company, and they're like, oh geez, worked for Amazon. Like,
Yeah.
let's just copy it.
Yeah.
One
Keith,
thing that I'll
Keith.
contrast that with is that at Jack Henry, our 50th anniversary of being a corporation is in about 3 weeks. And in 49.9 years of existence, we've never done a massive riff or layoff of
Wow.
any kind.
50 years.
So
That's
we're an
impressive.
old-fashioned company that just does not believe in doing that.
Yeah.
And our CEO is a man named Greg Adelson. And what he repeats in every town hall, he gets questions about AI all the time. And he said, we're not here to do more with more with less. We're here to do more with the same. We're going to take all of you. We're going to use AI to elevate you and to elevate Jack Henry to do an even better job than we did before.
Yeah.
And I think if we had 100 CEOs saying that the way Greg does, this whole conversation would be very different in the national.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very different.
How does, in Greg's mind, do you think, if you're playing, from spending time with him, how does he view sort of like future hiring? Is that still like
I think he thinks that we can grow faster than we have to hire. So
Yeah.
we might double the company in the next 5 years, but our staffing might only go up 20% or something. That's what doing more with the same means. It means we're getting efficiencies, but we're not using those efficiencies to cut more. We're using them to unleash higher growth and get farther faster with our people being more empowered. It's like I often talk about, everybody gets Iron Man suits, but it's still
Yeah.
us on the inside. Okay.
Right.
So that's where we're headed. That's where we're trying to head with it.
I love that.
Inside Jack Henry, because we have people express the same doubts about this technology and fears.
Yep.
And so, my head of AI transformation does a series, and about every couple weeks, he interviews another associate inside our company that has vibe coded something or has found a way to use AI in a cool way. And every one of those is someone who says, I was worried about this and I didn't want to learn it and I didn't think it would work. And I sat down and I figured it out. I had a coach help me or whatever. And now I'm a believer and this is awesome. And now I have my day back and I have space to think and whatever. And so we put those videos out to all associates, I think
Yeah.
about every 2 weeks or so, and talking about successes and demystifying what this is and showing it's an opportunity, not a threat. And it's all a question of interpretation, I think is really important. But we wouldn't have the hole we have. We wouldn't have to dig out of that hole if the discourse was a little more elevated than it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. We're doing something very similar. We're kind of launching a new thing called the Wall of Wins.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important that these walls, if you will, are not just comprised of your most senior level engineers, that these are
Mhm.
a peanut butter spread across the company. Your point before about somebody in facilities or procurement or anything like, the
Mhm.
win doesn't have to be something that, drives $10 million worth of revenue. The win can be, because, one of the things I absolutely love about AI is if you think back in traditional IT circles, one of the challenges I've always struggled with, I think all sales have struggled with, is that we have X amount of budget, Y amount of resources, and when we look at what we are going to focus on, it's very, very normal to kind of think about those things with very much of an ROI mindset, right? And so you tend to focus on the most strategic things, I mean, whether it's because of its, adds competitive value, drives revenue, cost efficiencies, competitive differentiation, whatever the factor might be. But it's like one of the challenges in that model, I think historically, is that the average departments oftentimes go underserved, because you tend to be focused on these big things. And sometimes these big things, take ERP,
Yep.
you and I talked about ERP before, like something like ERP, like it benefits, say it's a financial system, it benefits the financial department and ultimately benefits the company, but it's really only leveraged by a handful of people in the company in relative to percentages. And so much of our energy historically has been spent on the big things that are important and impactful, but almost at the expense in many ways of departmental and employee level productivity. And I see AI as a great level set. Yeah.
I totally agree with that way to put it. It's this axiom that the shoemaker's children have no shoes,
Yeah.
right? But now the shoemaker's children can make their own shoes. That's
Yeah,
what's coming.
absolutely.
Well, we could talk about AI all day, but we'd be
Sure.
remiss if we didn't come back around to Keith, your book, Maxing Out. And why don't you take us through the journey of writing the book, and what prompted you to do it, and what the experience has been?
Yeah, well, that's great. I appreciate you asking me that, Howie. I would say, as I explained at the beginning, I went on the journey from being technical and being a one-off programmer. Then I was a designer, and then I was a supervisor, and then I was an architect. Okay, but I also went when I became an executive, I was an executive at a startup, and I was the top technical person there, but I had a team of 20. Then I went to, and that was a company called ChoicePay. Then I went to MoneyGram, and I was head of development at MoneyGram, and I had a team of 200. And then I went to I went to ADP, and I had a weird role there. Then I went to Fiserv, and I had 1,000 people at Fiserv, which then grew to 4,000 people. Okay, and so I went on a trajectory over a 10-year period of a team of 20 to a team of 4,000. And the tools that I used to deal with the 20 people was a lot of like interpersonal conversation, connection, motivation, one-on-one, finding what makes them tick and what they want to do and what they
Hmm.
think is fun. That's how you do it. You unlock individuals. But when you get to 100 people, it's a challenge to know all their names. And when you get to 4,000 people, it's a challenge to know all the directors' names and the VP's names, let alone the
Yeah.
rank and file people. And so the tools that you use and the amount of effort you have to put into communication and alignment is different at those higher levels. And also the stakes get much higher. The money gets higher. It's hundreds of millions of dollars in your budget at that point. And so the way you communicate with the CEO about what you're doing, all that stuff changes. And so I went on that journey in a relatively rapid way. And I saw myself doing that. So over those years, I was mentoring other people, and people kept saying, Keith, you got to write this stuff down. Like, you should write a book. I had that not often, but sometimes. And I
Hmm.
wanted to, but I had a very busy job. Like, running 4,000 people is
Right.
very, very time consuming. And I just didn't have the brain cells for it. Well, that company did me the favor of laying me off at one point. There was a management change above, and the new boss wanted his guy in the role. And so that was fine. He swapped me out. And so that was fine. Well, then suddenly I was between jobs for a few months, and I thought, now finally I have the time to write this book. I'm going to knock it out. And so I thought it would be really quick. It turned into a year-long process to go through all the different stages. There's a lot of work involved in writing a good book and polishing. The level of polish, it's kind of like getting code from code complete to production. You
Yeah.
think code complete is 90% done, and it's actually 30% done.
Right.
And it's very true of a book manuscript too. So anyway, I went on that, and that's where the book came from. It's just a way to kind of get everything out on paper that I've said for years and years to different people who've come to me over the years.
Well, you did a fantastic job, and as I
Okay.
started to say earlier, I love just the progression aspect of how you did it, because these
Okay.
they're relatively short, concise. For those that I really encourage anyone listening to pick up a copy. It's a great read. It's a relatively quick read in many respects. I think as I told Keith, I think of it much more as almost like a reference manual in some respects. That it's
Mhm.
one of those things you're going to want to keep nearby and take off your desk periodically and go like, oh, what was Keith's advice about talking to a board, or different sort of attributes that are in here. And I just thought it was terrific, and it's. I love the way the journey aspects, because when we talk about to our IT leadership team, you've got people at all sorts of ends of the spectrum, right? You've got people who are, you know, maybe they started and they were like such excellent developers. Now they manage a team of developers or something in there, but they're still very early in their career. And then maybe they're a director, or they evolve to a vice president or a regional vice president or some different things. And so it's like, I think there's something in there for everyone is what I guess where I'm sort of going with this. And very impressed. And I love the lesson learned you come up with.
Well, thank you. I tried to make it. There's a lot of books for first-time managers, and there's a lot of advice. And think of every LinkedIn post about how to have an effective one-on-one. Okay. I did not want to write that. Okay. Writing a book for directors, for ambitious people who are high performers, they're directors who want to become VPs or VPs who want to become CTOs. Like, how do you make that leap? There aren't that many books about that. And so I thought this is an area where I can add value and I can really try to help people. And so that's what I did. And then the first part of the book, as you say, it's a little bit of a whiplash effect, because the first focus of the book is you got to work on yourself first. And before you can become a better leader, you have to become a better employee. And to
Yep.
tell a vice president that to become a CTO, he needs to be a better employee is a surprising place to start, and so
Yeah.
that's where we
Yeah.
started.
I love the subordinate paradox. And Brian,
Uh-huh.
we've talked about this many times. Like I always talk about, we manage three different directions, right? We manage up, we manage down, and we manage across, and they are three completely different relationships. And the subordinate paradox is interesting because you say that to be a great leader, you must first be a world-class subordinate. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Mhm. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think it's, part of part of going up the ladder is you have to earn the trust of your boss. The way you get more assignments, the way you take on more, is that your boss and actually the peers of your boss all need to recognize that you can do more and you deserve it. And to do that, you have to build trust with them. But I also think to do that, you have to be a better employee for them. They have to be someone that they can count on every time, and you're going to pull through no matter what it takes. You're going to make it successful. However, if you're a director or a VP, you've got a large team under you. You should also recognize that that team is watching you. Okay, and by you becoming a better subordinate for your boss, you're showing your subordinates what you expect from them, and you're modeling that behavior for them so that they see how you act and they want to. And then when you say, "You see how I did that there? I need you to do that." Okay, you're giving them an example and training them by being that way, and they can watch you in action. They're always watching you, and they learn from what works for you and how you're successful, and they try to emulate you. And so it's a two-edged sword. It is in your best interest to do better and to be a better subordinate, but that aspect of the way you do that teaches your subordinates how they should be with you, I think is not quite as obvious, and it's probably even more impactful.
That
Well,
requires a certain level of transparency too, as well, right?
Well, I think if you have a teaching mindset about your people, which you should, then when you handle a certain problem in a meeting or you are transparent with your boss about something, you turn back and you have your team's back and you're helping them or you're taking the fall for them. Then you turn around and you say, see what I did there? This is what I did. This is why, you know, you should learn from this. And I
yeah,
think if you
Keith,
can turn
oh,
any crisis into a lesson. Sorry, Brian.
No. I was going to reiterate the same type of thing. Keith has a chapter where, and one of the things I like about the format of the book too is that it tends to start off with an example. Like it tends to, and not so much a technology example, but just an example in life that, and how, a technologist might come to deal with similar issues. Like, I guess, again, I took it as you're not alone. Like these are not technology issues as much as these are just opportunities and maturity and things like that. And there's one paragraph toward the beginning of the book that talks about, I think the example used was Tiger Woods. I mean, Tiger Woods at the time, is like the greatest golfer maybe ever, and certainly the hottest golfer for large portions of his career. And he always had a coach.
Mhm.
And I remember we were talking about it, and Tom Brady. Tom Brady is the GOAT in, the NFL. And he always had, he would go back to the same coach that he had like in high school or college. He was his throwing coach.
Mhm.
Because the thing is, like we all know this, and if you apply it to either like human standards, it's like you can go to a Stephen Covey thing and go to like best practices, and you walk away feeling enlightened, and then like three weeks later you're back to your old habits if you're not like diligent about it. And so whether it's a mentor, a coach, or some other type of folks that can always ground you, I think it's such an important
Well,
characteristic of a successful
And you
person.
address
I
this
think
with radical mentorship section, correct, Keith?
with radical mentorship,
Your radical
um,
mentorship, the unconventional role models, right?
yeah, well, I definitely like mentorship and all that, but I think the coachability side of it though is, I had a bunch when I was doing agile transformations 10 years ago. I had this mainframe team that was a bunch of like cantankerous, get off my lawn types in their 60s. And I brought in these eager beaver agile coaches that were in their 20s and 30s. And
Oh
and
boy.
these COBOL programmers with these big beards were like, get out of my room. I'm not listening to you. What are you doing? Get off my lawn while you're at it. Okay. And so I came up with this Tiger Woods thing of like, you think you have it figured out and you've done this for 40 years. And yeah, you're pretty good at what you do. And there's no doubt you're good. That does not mean you do not have to be coached. And so I did that. I
Right.
came up with the Tiger Woods thing at that point, and we talked about that. And I said, look, if Tiger Woods need a coach, if he can use a coach, you can use a coach. And so after that, I got zero pushback. Okay. They got it. And so sometimes if you just kind of get in people's faces and slap them and just say that kind of a line, like if Tiger Woods needs a coach, then you probably need a coach too. And people
Right.
go, oh yeah, okay, I'll shut up now. And
And how does
it's
that
an
manifest? I
effective
think
way
that's what I
to
was
get
asking about
people
a
going.
moment ago. Oh, I'm sorry.
Huh?
How does that manifest? I think that's what I was asking a moment ago about the mentorship, because, obviously in sports, we have coaches and, we all kind of understand that. But, you don't have any coaches on your staff, right, Brian?
Hmm.
Right. So how does that coaching sort of manifest? Is it really the coaching that your direct superior is giving you?
I think I view part of my job is to be a mentor for my direct, down the line here.
Right.
Because the stronger I can make them, the better they make me look and the easier all of our jobs get, right? Teaching is a part of the job and we need to do that. And if you're a leader that's too impatient to do that, you're taking more on yourself than you should because you're not growing your people. And growing your people is not just because it's kumbaya on LinkedIn of how great you are at growing people. It's you're making your team stronger and you're able to do more as a department for those people. So I think that's a part of it. Then on the other hand, I think by growing those people and by teaching them, you are ensuring their trust. They see that you have their best interests at heart, and they start to be loyal to you. And over time, you get them to be more and more loyal, not in a manipulative way, but just
Right.
because they really know that you have their best interests at heart. And when you get that, then all of a sudden there's a sense of camaraderie on the team and a sense of shared mission, and you can align in a more in a deeper way. And that just gets the team firing on all cylinders in a better way. So I think mentorship mentality from a leader is almost an essential trait of a leader.
Yeah. Makes sense. It's symbiotic too. So there's two sides of this. There's the willingness to mentor
Mm.
on one side, and then there's the coachability on the other. Those two have to come together, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I tell my kids, when they get into when they're in the workforce now, I'm like, the most important thing you can do, especially at a young age, but at any age really, but is find a mentor. Like, everyone needs a mentor. And my kids are like, I don't know. I don't want to ask John in this particular area. Why would he want to mentor me? And I remember one time I was at a CIO event, and there was probably like 6 or 7 CIOs on the stage. And we were talking about mentoring, and somebody brought up the question about something similar came up, about mentoring and stuff. And I made the comment, and there was a large audience. And I said, of all the CIOs out there, like, please stand, right? Or raise your hand or whatever it was. And I said, now take your hand down if you ever said no to someone who asked you to be a mentor.
Nobody moved.
No, I mean, you might, you may not have as much time as other parts, because we all go through these cyclical kinds of things, but no one, I mean, it's such an honor,
Mhm.
Yeah,
to be a mentor.
that's what I was gonna say. It's an honor to be asked, and I think
Absolutely.
the lower down people seeking mentors feel like they often feel like they're imposing on that leader, and so they're shy about asking, or they don't wanna ask, and they avoid it. But the fact is, anybody who's asked is gonna be flattered that you ask them, and so it's a good thing. I would also say I would advise your kids, for example, don't wait on a formal mentoring program. Okay, I've never asked a boss to be my mentor. Okay, I just watch what they do and I learn, and I'll ask them a question about why they did this or why they did that, and I'm treating them like a teacher, whether there's a mentoring program or not. I mean, I think waiting for your corporation to create a formal program, or even waiting to ask somebody and get them to say yes, it's not a dating service. Okay, you're just learning from the people around you. You know.
Totally. It's funny you say that. That's a great way of saying it. I do think that's another thing is companies and sometimes HR organizations, they try to thoughtfully, but they try to put like guardrails around all this. It's almost like their own form of governance, because, and it's important because they understand the importance, but it's like, it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't require like, okay, every third Friday I'm going to meet with Kathy and it's going to be this thing. I mean, I think the best ones I've ever had are very informal ones. And to me, the other thing I think is you get a little bit, on in your career. I have, I've said this on other podcasts, like I have like 3 mentors, but they're all for different things.
Mhm.
Because what you also discover in time is that you may have a mentor who, kind of like Tiger Woods, that can help you with your swing, who maybe helps you in your day-to-day game, like
Mhm.
working the business, like how to interoperate with other executives, how to work with your teams and things like that. You've got ones that are like highly innovative, like they're leading edge people, and you want to stay close to them because, they're at the pointy end of the stick. And so they kind of know what's going on. And then in my mind, there's, in my case, like I've had some people who are just like caring leaders who operate a little bit more at, like, I'll say the board level. And those people have a different kind of insight and things like that. And everyone's different. But for me, I think as you evolve in your career too, you should just be open to, it's more than one. Like it doesn't,
Mhm.
not all
Definitely.
mentors are created equal.
Right.
Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, and your mentors also have strengths and weaknesses. You can learn from any of them. And my son is a high school quarterback, so we watch a lot of videos about professional quarterbacks and how they grew up and what they learned and how their throwing motion evolved. And so often these Hall of Fame quarterbacks talk about when they were a rookie and they were watching a different quarterback that was the starter, and they were learning from that person and trying to emulate what they did. And they would carve out 5 minutes every practice to try to throw the way Brett Favre threw, or the way, whoever threw. And so they didn't go up to Brett Favre and say, "Would you be my mentor?"
Right. Right.
They just emulated, they just followed, they just watched him closely. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I love formal mentoring, and I'll play ball with that when HR wants to do it. But I would say, Gen Zs and millennials out there should not be waiting for that. Either ask or just watch and learn.
Such a good point. It is such a good point.
Yeah. Well, and then if you think about it too, it's like what I worry honestly about with sort of like this latest generation entering the workforce is they're so comfortable using social media and like over reliance on, I'll text them, I'll snap them, I'll do this, whatever. It's like that's the other, and it's not mentorship, but it's guidance. I think it's just like develop real relationships with people. Like get off your butt, find the other person, like
Proximity is
get to
power.
know them,
Yeah.
and it's I mean, there's books to be written and they probably have already been written. I just haven't read them yet. But, when you think of COVID and that time period, like if I had 4 people on my staff and 2 are away and 2 are in the office and I'm in the office and I'm working with them on a regular basis and I hope maybe I hold them all at the same level. It's going to be really difficult when you think about those next promotions for it to not to be some of the people who are closest to you because you're whiteboarding with them, you're doing other things. Even if you're not trying to keep others involved, it's not exactly the same.
It comes down that's why I keep coming back to trust, right? You learn to trust those people because 'cause you're with them and you build social capital and collaboration, and you get, sort of, simpatico with them, and then you know that they're ready for more. So I agree, it's different.
Yeah, I think you hear me talk about this all the time, right? Proximity is power, right? And
Totally.
digital connection is not proximity, right?
And when that first happened, that remote worker was starting, and I was on a webinar about how to make remote work in a hybrid world, and the HR person who was talking said that we really have to guard against proximity bias because it's gonna be more likely that we promote people that are in person than people that are remote, and I was like, "Yeah, it is.
Right,
We're not gonna
duh.
guard
Like,
against it."
duh. Like,
Calling it proximity bias is
You don't
ridiculous.
say.
So,
yeah, yeah, it's
anyway.
funny. It is fun, and the other things about it, like I tell my kids too, I'm like, if you get an opportunity to travel with your colleagues, take
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Because, the other thing too you find is it's very easy to form an opinion about someone you don't know. And then
Mhm.
you go away with them, you have dinner with them, lunch and other things. You realize that, everyone's got different struggles, everyone's got different issues and
Yeah.
stuff. And it, it,
Yeah.
it just creates this, a sense of camaraderie or at
Mhm.
least, awareness and empathy.
Yeah.
And I think it's difficult oftentimes to be highly empathetic when you're distant. Even if you're the most empathetic natured person,
Yeah.
there's just this digital divide in some
I mean,
respects.
all business is based on relationships, is done on
Yeah.
relationships, and relationships are based on shared experiences. And, if you're not in proximity, your shared experiences are limited. Yeah,
I
seriously limited.
also I would agree with you on that travel thing too, Brian, because a lot of times people's official professional persona and trying to be all business and stick to the agenda and all that, and then when you get them on the plane and then the plane's delayed on the tarmac or you see them in the hotel lobby and you get a drink, like, you're seeing a different side of that person, and you start to get more of a 360 view of that person than you
Yeah,
had when it's only in meetings or let alone only virtual meetings, so
sure.
I think it is a big difference maker, I agree.
Yeah, big deal. Keith, one of the things that you do in the book, and I'm not sure I've seen this in many business books or many or even any business books, is you spend some time on family time, right? Protecting the family unit.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
I really appreciate that. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a few different places where I talk about that. When I first, one of the things I've said for a long time about being a better subordinate is that you need to give your boss I call it a steady trickle of pleasant surprises. You need over time, occasionally, you need to give your boss a pleasant surprise with something. And it's not a mountaintop thing. I'm not asking you to revolutionize business. Okay. Just saying, do something a little bit better than what they were expecting. And if you can do that every so often in a consistent way, your boss will like you and they will want to challenge you with new things. Hey, surprise me on this, surprise me on that. And they're not going to say those words, but they're thinking it. And so if you can find a way to do steady trickle of pleasant surprises, your boss will love you and that will pay off for you in your career. Well, about 10 or I don't know when, 10 or 15 years ago, I realized that in my own house life, I'm terrible at chores and I'm not good at putting the dishes in the dishwasher. I would phrase that as being a typical husband, but I'm sure there are plenty of husbands that are very good at doing that, but I'm not. Okay. And so when the socks are not in the hamper and the dishes are not in the dishwasher, what am I doing for my wife? I'm actually giving her a steady trickle of unpleasant surprises. Okay. And she sees those dishes and she's like, gosh darn it. And she, thinks a bad word about me, and that's not what I want. And I'm like, I need to be a better employee for her and give her a steady trickle of pleasant surprises. So now, it might be that for her, it's, tonight I went out to dinner before I did this podcast and I brought her some sushi back from the sushi place because I went to a fancy place on an expense account and she didn't get to do that. I did that myself, but I brought her back sushi and it's not a game changer for her and it's not it's not like we're going away on a marriage retreat for a weekend. I just brought her some sushi in 2 seconds, and then I came down here to do this. Okay. With my son, what I found is what he values is my time. And so he'll always ask me, he wants to go play catch. Since he was 6 years old, maybe younger, we go out in the yard and we play catch, usually throwing a football, and that's why he's a quarterback now. But he is, he's always asking me if I'll come play catch. But sometimes I'll go ask him. And I'll say, hey, I got a break now
That's
in my
great.
meetings. I'm not done with my workday yet, but I've got 30 minutes. Let's go play catch. And he loves that. He eats it up. And he doesn't know that I'm intentionally trying to give him a pleasant surprise, but like find the things that your kids value and that your family values and give them a pleasant surprise every so often. And they'll probably forgive your dishes a little bit more in the sink.
Well,
I have
I'll get
other
you- get
examples
to each
in the
your wife
book. I
on
don't
these.
know if that's the one you wanted, but I have a couple other examples in the book. Anyway,
Hopefully I'll get to meet
that's
your
the
wife.
one
I'll
that
have to
like
ask her
people
one of
like.
these days, Keith.
Yeah.
That translates, But I love that what you're saying because it is such a both in your personally and professional life. It is such a, I know like when at work, when someone does something small, like it makes such a difference, and it's and I think it's and to me it's like there's nothing better to do something on behalf for your boss or your colleagues or other things too, just because you're thinking about it. It's top of mind. It's like sometimes without getting astray on a whole million other topics, like reminds me of like, sometimes like even like vendor management. Like sometimes vendors say to me like, oh, how can I become more important to your business or more strategic? And I'll be like, I want to be top of mind for you. I don't want
Mhm.
you to like, to come in just when like it's time to sign another contract or to, or to tell me what it is that we're doing wrong. I want you to be thinking about my problems and to call me because you're at some other account going like, I just had this discussion with another company and man, I think this would be like really applicable to you given what you told me. It's like, and I just think a lot of vendors don't think that way. They're all trained salespeople, are often trained to sell. They're not trained, and it's that sort of, hunter gatherer kind of thing, right? What kind of salesperson are you? But I think the problem or opportunity in that model is just, it's all about relationship, as you said earlier, Howie,
Right.
and it's, and it's the difference. And then the family, it's the same way. It's like, there's small things you can do. And then there's like thinking about others. Like just be constantly top of mind,
Right. 100%. Well, the time is flying
Yeah.
by. Keith,
So-
we're having a good time. We have one last segment. It's called Confession Time. And, we believe that here at the CIO Project that we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And we were wondering if you would share one of your more
Oh, gosh.
larger failures in life and obviously what you learned from it.
Well, it doesn't have to be a failure. It could just be,
could be a challenge. It could be a
that you had to overcome. Or,
Failure is more fun, isn't it?
Thank you.
well,
Thank you. I
thanks.
appreciate that. Yeah.
I was just trying to give you.
We're always so timid going into this.
I once had a mentor who, in his job interview, when he was interviewing me, he's a very senior person in this one company. And he said, look, I'm a senior person here. I make more decisions than the average person in this company, which means I make more mistakes than the average person. And I thought that was such an illuminating thing for him to say and admit, even in the job interview when he had only met me in the last 30 minutes, So I think talking about our failures is immensely valuable. And I love that you have that segment on the show.
Thank you.
Here's the thing that I sort of ruminate on all the time, which is, I tend to be a big picture thinker and I put a lot out there. And so over the years, there have been 4 separate times in my career when I've been put in charge of building the next gen thing of whatever the legacy thing was. Okay. We have some major system that's running the company. We're going to go build the next gen version and get off of legacy and onto new technology and whatever. So I've done that 4 times and all 4 of those times have been dismal failures. Okay. They, they didn't work. They collapsed under their own weight, or we ran out of funding because, the upper management kind of stopped believing that we were going to make headway, whatever. And so I have literally thought about how do you replace a well-established, very stable legacy platform for 20 years? Okay. And so I have a lot of thoughts on that subject. I might need to write a book on that subject.
I was going to say, it sounds like another book.
It's going to be a short book, but it could be a book. So I would say so on that, I think it's really important to not be too ambitious about what you're trying to do. Usually you end up usually the advantage of going from a legacy technology to a modern technology isn't that the modern technology is better or more stable, because usually, Cobol and a mainframe will run for decades and not crash. And it's also never been hacked, and Mythos isn't going to find a vulnerability in ZOS and crack some Cobol program. Okay, that's not going to happen.
It's not going to
However, why do you move to these distributed languages and modern Golang and what have you if your mainframe is fine? Well, the reason is flexibility. And
Yeah.
so what happens is I'm going to do modern language and I want flexibility. And while I'm at it, I'm also going to expand the program and I'm going to make it better in all ways. And I'm going to do all this other stuff to it. And you end up trying to expand in 10 different dimensions, and the scope gets too hard and you cannot do it.
Yeah.
And so I think the best way to succeed at next gen replacement projects is actually to try to be as unambitious as you can and to only make the minimal changes you have to get into the modern languages. And then from there, you take advantage of that flexibility and innovate on that. And it becomes a two-step process rather than a one giant leap for mankind.
It's so
those
funny.
giant leaps do not work, and they're a giant waste of money. And I've wasted well into the 9 figures on those projects.
Oh yeah. And I won't go into my own because it's
Sure.
I had something like yours as well.
Yeah.
And when I think if someone's listening to
Well,
all
to be
this,
fair, Keith, you may or may not have saw that show, but the first show that we did, he had to do his own confessions. I think this is the same story,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I won't go into it today, but
I'll go watch that after this.
I've got we all have the I always think of like Jaws where everyone's showing their scars on the boat kind of thing. Like, if you had like, seasoned CIOs, it with in enough rum, you could go on like all night on these conversations, about what works and what doesn't and what fails. But the one takeaway, if you're listening to this, maybe from Keith's and certainly mine as well in this case, is, we made a comment earlier that like sometimes, people who are architects and engineers, like our backgrounds are similar in some ways. It's like they're more like artists than they are engineers oftentimes. And, and we treat the work that we do as a work of art in many cases. And you have to have these pencil down moments, and I think one of the problems oftentimes with, like both seasoned and junior level, people is that they're like, they just can't get to version 1. Like, it's like, we're having this conversation at work right now. It's like pencils down, like it's good enough. Like it doesn't, I know you could think of 20 more features to add to it, but like, let's get our success so we can build on it. Because as you said, at some point, like, and a couple of these aren't huge projects, but even with huge projects, like, the clock is ticking and the dollars are outflowing. And at some point, if you can't put a stake in the ground and, bring a MVP to life type of thing, then you get challenges.
Yeah, there's a lot of debate about MVPs and what does viable mean, and product management always thinks it means perfection in all ways.
Yeah.
The term I like is minimal, non-embarrassing product.
Right.
Get something out the door. Have you heard the expression polishing the cannonball, Brian?
Yeah.
Like there's a point at which you're over polishing. You're going to shoot it out of a cannon. No one cares how shiny your cannonball is.
Yeah.
Put it in the cannon and shoot it. It's good enough. Right.
So how many times have we looked at, like gone to your chief engineer architect and you're like, how you make it out? And he's like, and they give you a demo and you're like, wow, looks great. Yeah. I mean, but I'm sitting here and I can think of about 12 other things I'd really like to add. And you're like, you're already exceeded the expectations for the first release. And you're just, what's the expression you like to say? Like, great is the enemy of good, or, perfect or whatever, it's so true.
Perfection is the enemy of progress.
Yeah. But thank you. You're just a wealth of information. We could talk to you.
Yeah, we could talk.
Hours,
we could probably talk all night.
And you've been very gracious with your time.
I appreciate that.
No, of course.
Thanks for the invitation to come on, Brian.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And on a personal level, I've learned so much from you in the short time that we've got a chance to know each other.
That's very nice of you to say.
So
there you have it, folks. Mr. Keith Fulton, from Cobol and mainframe programmer to C-level executive, from coder to designer to supervisor to architect
to family
to executive of large organizations,
to a good dad and a good husband,
to AI vibe coding support teams and pod models today, to the author of Maxing Out. Thank you so much for joining us today, my friend.
I appreciate it.
All right,
Thank
guys,
you,
I'm going to leave you with the quote of the day, and here it is. Most leaders don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they refuse to be the least important person in the room. You cannot max out your team's potential if your own ego is taking up all the oxygen.
Nice.
Author, Mr. Keith Fulton. All right, folks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Right there.
Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you.